Welcome, students, to a brief video on understanding theoretical frameworks. So what I hope to do with this video is what you can see in the little graphic, which is to help make something clear that is probably somewhat fuzzy. So the first question that I think we need to address is, why is a theoretical framework important? Why do we need it at all? And of course, different approaches to qualitative research place a different level of emphasis on theoretical frameworks. So there's quite a few DMINs that don't use them at all. Grounded theory claims that it doesn't use a theoretical framework, but grounded theory actually starts without a theoretical framework, but in the end, quite often develops and uses a theoretical framework. So it's useful. We're going to make the case for why it's useful, and then we're going to make sure that you understand how it's used. So you are probably not the first person who has ever studied the phenomena that you're looking at, or at a minimum, a related phenomena. When we are engaged in the scholarly endeavor, we are always building on the wisdom of those who have gone before. We enter into the dialogue at the gates. So you are not just trying to come up with an explanation of your data in a vacuum. You are coming up with an explanation of your data that probably has some relationship with the way that other people have explained the data that they've looked at, that is either in the same wheelhouse as your data or similar enough to be connected. So you want to use the theories that other people have developed from their research. You want to be in relationship with those theories so that you are learning from the wisdom of those who have gone before, and so that you are contributing to the wisdom of those who will come after, that you're part of the stream. Secondly, a theoretical framework can help focus your analysis. You're already discovering, those of you who have done your data collection or are still doing it, that you have more data than you can analyze. That there's not only one way to describe your data. There's not just one way to organize, and analyze your data. That there are actually a number of different ways to do it. And you will have to select what some of the best ways are. Well, a theoretical framework can be an excellent way to organize your data. And it will help you decide what you pay attention to in the phenomena so that your insights will be most useful in the field of study that you're working in. Lastly, one of the most confusing aspects of a theoretical framework is that it can deal with either the content or the methodology. And I'm going to give you an example in a minute of of theoretical frameworks that deal with content and theoretical frameworks that deal with methodology. Both can be useful. And they can be useful in different ways. So the example that I'm going to use is actually Alan's question. Forgive me, Alan, but it's just a good question to use. But I'm partly using it because it's not only Alan's question. That I did a tutorial with a doctoral student who had a very similar question. So Alan and Ozzy both asked the question, what factors influence evangelicals' capacity and willingness to welcome migrants? So, you have evangelicals who often in this country, the United States, reject migrants particularly at this point in history, but not all of them do. So the question that both Alan and Ozzy were asking is, why do they or don't they? What are the factors that impact them that would have them do something that isn't in the pattern of evangelical rejection of migrants? So Alan actually looked at a number of different theories that explain why somebody who might reject migrants doesn't. One of the standard ones that he looked at is social contact theory. Social contact theory says that to the degree that a relationship exists between a citizen and a migrant, that relationship will influence that citizen to be more likely to welcome the migrant. So the more social contact you have, the more profound that social contact is, the more equal it is. Those are all studies that have been done in this arena of social contact theory to look at what kinds of social contact have the greatest impact. So if Alan was choosing to use that as a core part of his theoretical framework, he would look at his data and he would say, is social contact a factor in these evangelicals' welcome of migrants? Do we see that less social contact is a factor in the evangelicals that don't welcome migrants? What are we seeing? Or are we seeing that a different kind of social contact is what Alan is encountering than the kinds that are usually listed? So maybe it doesn't have to do in his study with frequency or with depth or with peer relationship. Maybe there's something else. Maybe just pulling it out of the thin air. Maybe he's noticing that it's a certain amount of spiritual connection that seems to make the difference. Any of those could be answers to the question, but you can see how the question both connects him with a stream of conversations around this issue. It connects him with people who've created that theory, and it connects him with the people who are continuing to work with that theory. Ozzy, on the other hand, had used a theory from social psychology, which is attachment theory. Attachment theory says that parents and the bond between parents and children comes partly as a result of the dependence of the children. That the children's dependence on the parents evokes in the parents a deep sense of affection and connection. That comes out of social psychology. So what Ozzy said is, when evangelicals welcome migrants, do we find that they tend to welcome dependent migrants more than independent migrants, particularly if those dependent migrants Ozzy was looking at are female? She was particularly interested in looking at gender issues too. Are they more likely to welcome migrants if there's a dependency factor that maybe evokes a parent-child bond, or maybe creates a parent-child bond between the citizens and the migrants? Now, if Ozzy discovers that her findings support that theory, that will be controversial, because that will fly in the face of social contact theory, or not all social contact theory, but the studies in social contact theory that say that peer relationships, equal relationships, create a greater likelihood of welcome. So Ozzy is actually challenging that theory with the theory that she decided to work with. Now, both of those are frameworks from the social sciences. You could use a framework, a theological framework, and you are not limited to one framework, especially in missiology, where you often choose a theological framework and a framework from the social sciences. So a theological framework that either Ozzy or Alan might use has to do with the theology of grace. Does evangelicals' understanding of the grace of God for sinners make them less judgmental and therefore more likely to welcome migrants? Are, in Alan's research and in Ozzy's research, are they finding that that's a factor that the people who are welcoming name, that they really have a deep sense of humility around God's grace for them, and that makes them more likely to give grace to other people? Or does that not show up at all? And of course, when we do our leadership pilots, if that didn't show up, either one of them actually could have done a leadership pilot or could do a leadership pilot that says, well, what if we immerse people in theological education and training around grace? Does it seem to make a difference? Even if you didn't find it in what currently exists, you might experiment to find out whether it was possible. So those are all content frameworks, right? They have to do with the content of what they're studying. They could also bring a methodological framework. For example, they could use critical methodology. So they could ask, for example, are there power dynamics between immigrants and evangelicals that affect the welcoming process? So you can see that there are some implicit power dynamics in social contact theory and in attachment theory. But a critical methodology would be particularly interested in lifting up those power dynamics and at looking at their role and impact. So I hope this was useful. Remember that you're always welcome to consult with any of us about your theoretical framework, about how you're currently using it, and about how you might use it. Thank you.